Welcome to our oral history video series. Coquitlam Heritage gratefully operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam, Tsleil-Waututh, Kakate, and Katzie First Nations, all of whom continue to live on these lands and care for them, along with the waters and all that is above and below. Oral histories are an important part of our collections. They not only enhance our collection by documenting local history, but they also personalize the historical record. We at Coquitlam Heritage have put together a series of oral history interviews to highlight different community members in our city and the stories they have to share. This is an ongoing project, so please keep your eye out for more videos in the future. Subscribe to our channel to be kept updated. If you or someone you know who lives in Coquitlam is interested in doing an oral history interview, or if you have questions about this project, please feel free to get in contact with us. Our contact info is in the description. We hope you enjoy!
I was born October 8th, 1990 in White Rock, British Columbia.
I was born in 1937 in the island of St. Kitts in the Caribbean.
Born in March 31st, 1941 in Port Alberni, BC, which is on Vancouver Island.
I was born in 1963 in southern Alberta.
I was born in 1968 in Vancouver at St. Paul's Hospital.
I was born in 1936, March 23rd, 1936, in Pakistan. That was British India at that time, but later on, as the partition happened, it became Pakistan.
I think every generation has its world event that affected them, and for me it was probably 9/11. That was, I would say, the most impactful world event that I can remember, at least one that sort of happened all at once. And I would say COVID is going to be that for kids growing up today. It's going to be, so what happened in your childhood that sort of defined this thing, or what major event happened, it's going to be this, but it could be the Vietnam War, it could be World War II or First World War, but every generation has its big event, and all I remember from that, because I was still fairly young at that point, I was in elementary school, was waking up in the morning. My parents told me what had happened. We sat down, watched the TV, went to school. At school, we sat through the whole day just listening to the radio, hearing everything that was happening. And then obviously the fallout from that we're still experiencing. I mean, you look at ISIS as sort of the most recent example probably of a major terrorist organization or a major world-changing thing that came out of this event from ages ago. And yeah, but there's been plenty of defining moments, I think, throughout my life. That's probably just the one that would have been defining for everyone, including me.
No personal effects of a world event, but I do remember two incidents which pertain to the World War II while I was a child, which is most interesting. Not that I knew what was going on at the time, but I later was able to put pieces together and realize, oh, that's what that was about. One was about a somewhat humorous incident where apparently the powers that be, the government was concerned that there were German ships in the Caribbean waters, and some nights they wanted all the lights turned off, whatever lights. We had so few street lights anyway, but they will turn off the street lights, from the light poles. But they went from house to house asking people to turn off their lights. You need to bear in mind that we're not talking electricity here. We're talking oil lamps. Okay, so one particular night, this police came by our house and was demanding that we turn off the light. And my older sister scared like anything else. She blew the light out. My mother, who's quite a strong-willed person, said, "I beg you, put my light back on." I don't know what my light have to do with it. Well, in fact, in reflection, I have to ask, really, what does an oil lamp do to attract anybody who's in the ocean? So that was one incident that I remember, and then I was able to connect it later on with the war. The second thing that I remember was the shortage of food. Lots of our imports came from Canada and England, and obviously during the war things were not in good shape, and so people improvised quite a bit. I found out later that there's one particular year where things were so bad, that is, that the normal type of imports and foods were not getting through, and people had to improvise with what they had. There's a particular fruit called breadfruit. Many people sort of despise it in some ways, but that particular year, the breadfruit trees across the island just bore like nobody's business. People began to realize that they had options, taking this fruit and turning it into some wonderful things that they had not thought about. I wish I knew what it was, but my mother, I remember drying some of the breadfruit, grinding it into kind of a flour, and made this, my mind still tells me is the most tasty pancakes or fritters ever. I wish I knew how she made it. But those two little bits and pieces of memory began to make sense as I got older and realized something about the war. I thought, isn't that interesting? Yeah, the war did affect us, but not quite negatively as we thought it might have,
The thing that really reading about was, the Second World War really affected all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So the results of the Second World, how the World War, like reading history books of, what happened, how it happened. The Second World War affected all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in Canada here at the time, and I was only 5 or 6 years old, and how all around us at that time had someone coming back from the war, didn't come back from the war. And then the other thing that world event which was important is India's independence in 1947 from England, and it became just a Commonwealth country instead of so that was very important event for all of us here in Canada, all over the world. Indians all over the world were affected by that, and we were too. And when India became independent, became a country of our own, point of pride to see how, and it's a democracy, and the two main languages in India, one is English. You go to India, everybody speaks English. Everybody, once they get to grade 3 or 4, have to take English. My wife, she came to Canada, she could speak English. She was born there, raised there. So English and Hindi are the main languages, and every state has different languages, but the main language is Hindi and English. So that was important for all Indians worldwide, that India was now an independent nation and a democracy, and English being the spoken language. So that was another world event that was important to us, for those two events. And the other one was, the business aspect of Europe. At the end of the Second World War, Canada became prosperous because everybody needed our product. The United States, Europe, they needed lumber. They were rebuilding. If you look at the pictures of the Second World War, all those cities in Europe were demolished. So they had to be rebuilt. Well, Canada prospered for the forest industry and the material. We have a lot of raw material here that goes all over the world.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. And the only one I can really point to in retrospect was redress. I think that's when I finally, my grandparents had talked about being moved from Mission and losing their stuff. And I didn't really think it was like a Canadian or world issue until redress. And I thought, okay, so the government is apologizing for this, so it must have been as bad as my grandparents made it out to be, or my thought of that, because if they're going to basically apologize and offer this acknowledgement to Japanese Canadians and to give each surviving Japanese Canadian this money, it must have been a big deal, like as big as I thought it might be. But because it didn't affect other people, I thought maybe it wasn't as important as I thought. So this acknowledgement was impactful. And also, it's really funny because my parents used the redress money to further our education. They spent on our university. And my grandmother, who's still alive at the time, bought herself a great big satellite dish so she could watch wrestling on TV. She could watch it anytime she wanted. I thought that's pretty great.
For me, growing up, I remember Elvis dying, which is weird, but I remember being in San Diego with my family. We were driving down we drove all the way down to Tijuana. I think we were in San Diego, and my mom was crying. I was, what the heck's going on here? And I didn't even really know who Elvis was. So I guess that's traumatic. The other one I would think would be Mount St. Helens erupting, which was, I think I was about 12. And I remember the ash from the volcano was all over all the cars, and that didn't really affect anything I did. We still played soccer, so we still got to go outside and play. So it didn't really affect me. Other than that, I don't really think of anything. 9/11, so far away. There has been some earthquakes in Italy, in the region that I'm from, but our family wasn't really affected. They're still okay. Nothing was damaged too badly. World War II, I wasn't around for that. Yeah. But that affected my family, my father's parents, but it didn't affect me.
Except the partition, otherwise no. Partition was the one that was the biggest effect. I was 11 years old at the time. Really, as a child, when it happened, my father and the rest of the family sent us to India. They somehow knew where we were, that's going to be Pakistan and India. And we originally, my grandparents lived our heritage village. They sent us back there. So we didn't see any of this happening, but it was on the news and all over the world. And my dad and the family brought the rest of the village back to India in trying way. It was hard. And that was about the time when, I remember when I was young and we were in India, I remember that was when Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. And I remember that. So, but it was tough time at that time. But we all came through it.